Oh boy, do I have an Odyssey for you, because just over a year ago, Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey broke pre-sale records. No trailer, no casting announcements, no footage. People bought tickets a full year plus in advance for IMAX showings of a movie they had never seen a single frame of, on the strength of two words: Nolan and Odyssey. This is one of the most pure displays of audience trust in movie history. Then this week, we get the final trailer and almost 500,000 dislikes against only about 50,000 likes. The same audience that broke records blind buying tickets just turned on this film in one of the most lopsided ratios in the history of this platform. Not critics, not some outrage, not any campaign from people who are never going to see it. The customers, the people who already are holding tickets, turned against this film. What happened between the record pre-sales and the record backlash? Well, I have a specific perspective because I spent not only decades as a filmmaker and a fan just like you, but I also spent years teaching ancient Greek history, including this exact same story. So today, I want to talk about what this trailer actually shows about where Hollywood has gone wrong and where that doubling down is taking them. And that is pretty much to their end. But we're going to talk about why the audience has done the way they have with this ratio and what the Odyssey actually is. Because I think understanding that is exactly why this backlash is happening. So pop that tape in. I got you. Let's go do this. All right, so before we get to the trailer, I want to talk about the story itself for just a second, because I think you have to understand that in context. Yes, the message and the agenda and your political beliefs have been put in front of the story, which is something that I preach against on this channel all the time, no matter which side it comes from. But to understand the Odyssey will give you more of a context here. You're talking about a story that's roughly 2,800 years old, and it is one of the foundational texts of Western literature, and it has survived. It has survived the fall of empires, the burning of libraries, through translations in every language and custom on earth for one reason. And it ain't the monsters, it's not the adventure, it's that the Odyssey is the most genuinely human story ever told. It's really about one thing: a man who wants to get home, and he wants to get home to his family. Odysseus isn't a superhero. He's a husband and a father who's been gone 20 years, 10 of those at war and 10 of those lost trying to get home. And everything he endures, whether it's temptation and he has to resist it or not, or monsters that he outwits, it's all in service to one goal, and that's getting back to his wife and son on the other side of the sea. And you've got Penelope over there, who's a historically heroic figure in herself, because she's holding the kingdom together for this 20 years through her wit and her loyalty, refusing to give up on her husband. And because of that, this story has survived nearly 3,000 years. Not because it's Greek, which it is, but not because it's old, which it also is, but because every generation that has ever lived understands wanting to go home. So when you adapt the Odyssey, that's the trust, that's the story, that's the foundation that you are inheriting. 2,800 plus years of it. Now, what this trailer showed and what is going wrong with this film and Hollywood a lot in general. First, the dialogue. The dialogue that we get in the trailer is written distinctly modern and in a very casual, TikTok-y register. The rhythms, the phrasing, the contemporary speech, or what a lot of people have rightly commented, sounds like a contemporary teen CW drama, but set in ancient Greece. And I want to be fair here, because nobody's expecting this to be in ancient Greek and reading subtitles. We don't need that, but everything is going to modernize, but there used to be a formalistic way of presenting language in this that still felt prestigious and set apart, the way they would talk in ancient epics, like big movies of the past, that they've just abandoned here. If you think about the way they did in the Ten Commandments, the way they would talk, it's more regal, it's set aside, it's different from the contemporary on purpose. And that is enormous difference. You can try to say you're being accessible, but when you go into what feels like dialogue that comes from a modern social media feed, then the audiences don't hear accessibility. They hear the filmmakers are embarrassed by the original register of the film. And the audiences are really sophisticated now when it comes to picking up on a filmmaker being embarrassed by their material and the story they're telling. And if they're embarrassed by the story they're telling, why do we want to listen to them tell it or watch them tell it? And then there's the narration choice here. Homer telling the poetic story of the Odyssey is the oldest voice in Western storytelling, and it has been replaced in this version with a rap artist. Okay? That's never going to fly. If you're going to do that, you need a whole recontextualization of this story in the way they did with Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And then people dismiss it as this is a modern retelling, and that's fine. But here, he talks out of both sides of his mouth. He wants complete authenticity over here, and then over here, he goes with modern sensibilities to serve an agenda and a message, and there's just really no other way to interpret that in this case. So when you do that, it's like it comes off as a marketing decision, pandering to an ideology, and it's all wearing a bold, formal experiments clothes. An audience can tell the difference between the two instantly, even when they can't articulate it. There's no backlash against Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Because you saw that was a different retelling of it in a modern sense. Over here, we have Christopher Nolan screaming that it has to be authentic on these points, but then over here pandering to a modern message, and that loses trust of the audience. And then maybe one of the bigger things before we get to the biggest thing is the translation of it. And this translation has reportedly been built on a specific modern translation of the epic poem. One of those translators, the main translator in this case, is told through a very contemporary lens that leans very hard and openly about being a feminist lens, in which everything is recontextualized through that lens, through that ideology, making deliberate choices on reframing how certain characters and dynamics read and how they appear throughout the story. Translation choices are invisible to most moviegoers, but they are enormous. And in this case, they take the forefront and they're not invisible, because every translation is an argument from the translator about what the story means. And basing a $250-300 million adaptation on the single most ideologically distinct translation of the last century, rather than one that is built on a general scholarly consensus, is a choice. And it's a choice that tells you the filmmakers are more interested in the ideology that they can push through the Odyssey and what the Odyssey could be in terms of that ideology and agenda, rather than saying what the Odyssey really is. And then there is the big one. There's the casting, and there's just no way around it. And everyone's arguing about it for good cause. Let's talk about this like adults for just a second. I know that's tough, but Helen of Troy has been cast by an actress who in no way, shape, or form or argument matches the character that we have understood for 28 centuries. 28 centuries. A Greek soldier is played by a performer who isn't even sure what they are and is 5'1" and 90 pounds. And that particular Greek soldier, played by Ellen Page, is not even in the Odyssey, but it's interjected into this story. And when you do that, There's no other way to read that than ideology, agenda, messaging interjected into something where it doesn't belong and where it never existed. So now you have that, and you have Helen of Troy, a specific look that is described specifically. She is Greek. She is the most beautiful woman in the world. And she's the face that launched 1,000 ships. And she's specific as a literary, and in this case, a historical or mythological figure. And she has a specific function. She's the face that launched 1,000 ships. And she is, it's like she is so beautiful. It's the embodiment of beauty that is so catastrophic that it destroyed a civilization. Which, by the way, people say, oh, this is myth, this is myth. They actually found the city of Troy and can discern that it was destroyed by war. And so how much of this is myth and how much of it is real? It's more likely a myth based on real happenings. So either way, these are real Greek people, and she's described as, basically like blonde hair, blonde reddish hair, blue eyes. We have photos, we have paintings, and we have reliefs, and we have descriptions of her that would have already been considered exotic at that time. So trying to hide behind the exotic angle doesn't work on this casting. So she is Greek, and a woman this is in a story that is fundamentally about Greek identity and about a Greek man trying to return to a Greek home. The text is not vague. The description is not vague. It is absolutely specific in what it says. So you can't go against that and cast and say, well, I'm going to be colorblind, like on some stage production where the artifice is the point, but here, photorealism, a realism is supposed to be the point in a $300 million epic that asks you to believe that we're actually in Bronze Age Greece. And that's a problem in and of itself, because this is a Bronze Age and we have steel armor or steel plated armor over here. So again, this is the inconsistencies of authenticity versus contemporary retelling and putting in a message. So you create a constant, when you do this and you deliberately miscast and put ideology above story, you create a consistent low-grade dissonance in the audience watching it. They can never fully immerse themselves in the story because you have put a forced inclusion where it need not be in there, and it destroys the illusion of the story that you are telling, because you have people watching the movie realizing this person cares more about their message, their ideology, and all of that above the entertainment, above the importance of the story. And audiences are not going to read that as inclusion. They're going to read that as message pushing every single time. And you're going to end up with 500,000 dislikes. And here's the thing, one of these four things, and you're probably going to survive without that much backlash. Their survival audiences are generous. Because they genuinely want something good and they trust this filmmaker. But when you start to go against the source material, when you start to talk out both sides of your mouth, when you claim this over here and that over there, audience see this pattern. They see this pattern in the failing movies and they're exhausted by it. There's an audience saturation and exhaustion here that has been built up through 15 plus years of losing goodwill and benefit of the doubt in exchange for message first filmmaking. And that's what you get here. The audience see a pattern that is repeated and they are exhausted by it and they are fed up with it. So let me real quick tell you what 500,000 and climbing dislikes actually tells you about the Odyssey and Nolan in this trailer, because it's pretty unprecedented, this level of ratio. And I don't even know if it's being read correctly is how big this really is. Christopher Nolan has spent the last 25 years building the single most valuable asset that a filmmaker can own, and that is audience trust on stuff that is sight unseen. That's where the record sales came from in this. People didn't buy tickets to the Odyssey. They bought tickets to a Christopher Nolan movie. And that's no plot, no cast, no footage, really nothing about it. Just faith that the man who made The Dark Knight, who made Interstellar, who made Oppenheimer would honor truthfully and honestly a 2,800-year-old important epic story and do it fairly and honestly. The trailer was the evidence that the faith would be repaid to the audience. And when this particular trailer came out, it destroyed all of that faith and trust. It's not a review of a movie that nobody has seen. It's a measurement of betrayal and exhaustion compared to the expectation and excitement. The mathematical difference between what was promised and more of what is revealed that the audience is tired of. It's the exact same measurement I have been going after and pointing out on this channel. Hollywood inheriting properties, IPs, stories, and audiences that have been loved and trusted for all this time, or in this case, in like millennia, right? And all they had to do was build and honor it fairly, and they had the resources to do that. The trust in those stories was an asset. The trust was always the biggest asset that they had. And the industry keeps being shocked, genuinely shocked, every time when it discovers that that asset can be taken away by messaging and ideology and agenda that destroys those stories. And then they're surprised when that audience is fed up and they don't show up, or in this case, dislike it on epic levels. What's sad is what this could have been, right? Christopher Nolan, though I don't really think he's necessarily the right person to direct the Odyssey, but with his big sweeping visuals and attention to detail that he's brought to other stuff, if he had brought to this film, we could have had an epic, authentic retelling of this instead of "Are you crying over your daddy?" and casting and all this ideology put over it. And the tickets pre-sales showed this, and I think secretly they knew that. That's why they put these pre-sales on available so far in advance, before any big announcements about cast and who was playing whom and all of that. And they tried to safely bank that first weekend to artificially manipulate the outcome, because they knew when this came out, this casting, that the tide had been turning and people were going to be fed up. I just don't think they really knew they were going to be fed up on this level. And it shows in this trailer that is just continually climbing in dislikes. You can't write that off as a few angry, whatever you want to call them, online complaining or review bombing this. It is actual truth of audience fatigue. And I'm not sure that it's going to change until audiences change. Change and get back to storytelling first, and you get Project Hail Mary. You get Michael. Continue down this road and you get closed theaters and the complete collapse of Hollywood under the weight of their own message. The truth is that Odyssey will survive. It's survived the fall of civilizations. It's survived nearly 3,000 years. The Odyssey story will survive and it will continue on. Whether or not these filmmakers and Hollywood continues on remains to be seen, because it can't just be translated into another language or into another retelling. It's going to have to be reshaped, Hollywood as a whole, into what the audience wants instead of the ideological agenda of the very few who want to project it onto the masses. That's what has to happen. This story of this movie is the story of modern Hollywood in a single moment. Trust inherited, trust spent, trust destroyed, and an industry that still hasn't figured out that the audiences were never the obstacle to great art. Their own messaging first is the obstacle that is going to be their own undoing. Odysseus spent 20 years trying to get home. Somewhere along the way, the people making our biggest movies forgot that we're all just trying to do the same thing every time the lights go down. So, I don't know. In the comments, let me know. Are you still planning to see this movie? I imagine a lot of people are going to see it just to see what it's about. And of course, that first weekend's pre-sales have cushioned it. But I want to know, and would you rather see an adaptation that tried to get it right instead of forcing these things into a story where it doesn't belong? And that's what I got for you. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Hyping it up helps the channel. I am going to be honest with you, as I always am, and I'm tired of it too. And you're going to see that, because these films, this is something that I love, have taught. This hits me on my filmmaker side and my history teacher side, and it's really just exhausting. And I'm tired of staying quiet about it. But that's what I got for you. And until next time, be kind, rewind like always. This is Chase with AV Pop Culture, and I'll see you real soon. I know.